welcome back. We're thrilled that you stuck with us through the second senatorial district debate. We appreciate everyone that participated and came and watched, and now we're extremely excited to have our post-debate roundtable. And with us, we have Representative Ron Hicks of St. Charles County. While in the legislature, he authored Jonathan's Law, which is it's in the books today. We're also with Jane Dueker, the former chief of staff to Governor Holt, now a principal partner at Stinson. Gregg Keller, a principal with the Atlas Strategies Group, and Ryan Burke with the RWBurke Group. Thank you guys for being here. First of all, Gregg, we'll go to you. What was your reactions to the debate this evening?
I thought they did a nice job. I think they all have credible claims to being conservatives. I was looking at all three of their ACU ratings, their American Conservative Union ratings, before we got here tonight. I think they're all in the 90 to 95 to 100% ACU rating range every single year. At least everyone except Bob Onder, who hasn't had an opportunity to, he voted, but that was since before those ratings came out. So I think everyone did a pretty nice job. I thought that Onder was really polished. He looks like a guy, comes across like a guy who's run for Congress before. When you're a political consultant, you like to have your candidate be able to push his message, but then also kind of go after the other guys. And I thought that Onder did a nice job of being able to do those two things at once. Talk about, hey, here's where I am on abortion, and here's maybe where I differ from the other folks, for instance. One thing that kept coming back to me time and time again throughout the debate was Vicki Schneider's got a really compelling life story.
I saw that, yeah.
And, she got the abortion question, and she eventually got to the point, it was kind of at the end of her answer, she kind of like threw in there, oh yeah, and I became pregnant when I was 17, and I'm like, man, you really buried the lead. I mean, I would have made that the theme of the entire answer. Well, let me tell you what my views are on abortion, and they're, they stem from the fact that I myself became pregnant when I was 17 years old. I thought she did the same thing, for instance, on the Second Amendment question too. She kind of threw it in there at the end that, hey, I was abducted when I was 17 years old, and you're like, whoa. I thought it would have been really powerful answers on both those, kind of lead with those. But I thought they all did a very nice job. It's very difficult. Most people don't do debates every single day on television, but I thought everyone did a nice job.
Ron, you are the St. Charles Countian amongst us. What did you think? What is it? What are the important factors in that district that will determine the race?
Actually, I think the questions, we're hitting them. You got people there that are in the job market. We have the right to work issues. We have the abortion issues. We have the economy issues. It was in the wheelhouse. That is in the wheelhouse for St. Charles County. And there's no one better in that wheelhouse sitting there amongst those three candidates than myself. I actually hold a seat that was held by, matter of fact, I think all three of them, I probably have a part of their district right now. I know I have a part of Vicki Schneider's district. I have a part of Chuck Gatschenberger's district. And at the time, back then, I even had a part of Onder's district. So I'm getting to see these punches thrown firsthand. I see the signs go up. I see the emails. I see all the Facebook, Twitters. I see everything going on. I watch it. I can drive through neighborhoods and see, I see the Chuck wagon here, or I see Onder's group walking a neighborhood here, and I can see Vicki's signs everywhere. I see people. As a matter of fact, I saw signs going up yesterday on a 79. So I get to see a lot of this firsthand, and I think they did a great job, and I do have to agree with you. I think there were some areas where points could have been, pushed from the start. It is no secret, obviously. I mean, you could tell, like you said, Mr. Onders did look very polished up there. He seemed ready for the debate. I didn't see him reading a whole lot off of cue cards or anything like that. Went right to the points, hit them hard. I got to give it to Representative Gatschenberger as well. He did a great job with his answers and questions too. They all three were on a good level playing field there. And I mean, the audience could see though, when something was said out of the ordinary or that was wrong, there were facial expressions made. So I think
wasn't that personal story by Ms. Schneider? Wasn't that a part that you'll take away?
Oh, definitely.
I've
known her for a long time too. That's one of the hard parts about this is I know all three of these candidates and I know them well. They're friends of mine, and to hear that story come up like that, I mean, you can tell it's close to her heart because she didn't touch on it. She laid it out there, but she did not touch on it, and I haven't heard it. And I've sat in her office for hours at a time, just her teaching me about certain things of running a campaign and stuff like that. And same with Chuck. There were a few areas there too, though, where I think he could have push some issues because you got to look at where they're at. You got one that used to sit in the seat that I'm in. You got one that's still sitting in a seat, and then you have another one that sat in a seat who's now ran for Congress and now is running for Senate. So, yeah, this is going to be hot. It is heated. I see the thing saying, a hot race in the Senate, St. Charles. You bet.
What did our Democratic friends take away from today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can talk about sort of the principles that are important in the Republican primary, but what I can talk about is I thought that Mr. Schneider's story, I thought it was very natural. It didn't look like, I sort of disagree with you in the sense that I think it came out of her naturally instead of this is a political point I'm trying to make. I'm just, you know, so I thought that when she wasn't, you know, looking at her papers, she was extremely effective and connected with people. I mean, I wanted to listen. I wanted to hear the story. I thought, you know, Dr. Onder did a phenomenal job as well. I think he, you know, is a very effective speaker. And I think, you know, the third candidate, Mr. Gatschenberger, he has some very unique perspectives. They're three very different people to me. That was the one thing that I thought was very unique is it's going to be challenging, I think, for the voters because they all have different strong points and they have three very different styles. And, you know, but I think they addressed each other pretty well without looking, you know, petty and, you know, below the belt. And it looks like they live with each other pretty well. And so I thought that was nice to see. So, yeah, I thought it was good.
Ryan, you spent a lot of time in Jefferson City. Did you think Representative Gatschenberger benefited from being fresh from those legislative wars? Literally 2 months ago, he was on the floor of the House debating. Do you think he seemed a little bit fresher on some of those issues?
Yeah, I think it was fresh in his mind. I would just comment that also Onder was great. I mean, he's clearly run for Congress before and was excellent. In a right-leaning district, how far to the right can you go is really what a Republican primary is, and all three are setting themselves up well.
Speaking of that, the election does end in the primary. Is there a problem? Should the Democrats have been able to field a candidate and
It's
run a
always been
credible
the problem
race?
in St. Charles County. I mean, it should be more competitive. We should have more races up there with Democrats running.
And we need to develop a bench that, you know, has a message that can resonate. There are a lot of Democratic principles that could resonate in St. Charles County, and I think that we haven't gotten to the point where we've gotten people in a position to do that, and that's something we should clearly work on.
Moving past the debate, talking about some of the issues that are being ruminated in Missouri politics now, we'll turn to the tax cut debate. Not only last session was there a tax cut vetoed by the governor. Some Republicans felt a too weak tax cut. Many Democrats felt too strong and overridden with the help of a Democrat legislator from the St. Louis area. Representative Hicks, is this the end of tax cuts or will there be more in future sessions?
Well, I sure hope there's going to be more in future sessions. I mean, that's one of the reasons they sent us up there in a majority is to hopefully get some tax cuts going. I mean, we need them. Families need them. Businesses need them. This isn't just a one-sided deal. This is all across the board in the state. We need some tax cuts.
Jane Dueker, you've worked in the governor's office. Yeah. You've put out projections of what tax cuts would do and what they wouldn't do, and tax increases and what they wouldn't do. Does the governor still have credibility on the numbers he puts out on these tax cuts?
I mean, I think, yeah, I think he has some. This is the problem. You know, when you have a legislature that doesn't even fund the formula, the Republican enacted foundation formula, I think that the governor has a very strong argument to say, look, finish what you started, get education where it needs to be before we start doing this. And so, you know, I do think that that's credible. It is difficult, and I will tell you, we were the first administration that had declining revenues. I oversaw then a $24 billion budget. It's bigger now, which is ironic since we've had Republicans in charge. The budget is actually bigger than when Governor Holm was there, and he, as a governor, he cut more out of the budget than any other governor in history. So ironic again that was a Democrat. But when you're the one running government and you're the one that has to make sure the bills get paid, and you know, you can't play around because by the time the fiscal year goes through, you can't withhold at the end of the year to fix your financial problems. You have to start to try early. Now, you can always release, and that's what you do, and you control the rate of spending. But it's not like you can get to, you know, May and say, oh, we've got a, you know, $200 million shortfall, and just pull $200 million out of the foundation formula. And what people don't understand is so much of the budget is not discretionary. You know, the general revenue part is such a small portion of the total funds that you're looking at K through 12, higher ed, prisons, nobody's going to touch prisons, and Medicaid. And you know, those are the only four pots that you can withhold from it at effective level in order to cover some of the shortfalls that could happen because of this tax cut. So, would I rather us keep our AAA bond rating and have him withhold money and make sure that the bills get paid? Absolutely. And I think that Missouri has always been a fiscally sound state, fiscally responsible, whether Democrat or Republican. And, you know, we're never going to put ourselves in a spot. And when you're the one guy sitting in the chair, that the only one that can pay the bills, you know, you're going to err on the side of having enough money in the budget because God forbid you don't.
Ryan, you and Gregg are both running campaigns in swing districts. Can you cut taxes too far? Is there a pushback in some of these swing districts to cutting taxes too much?
For sure. I mean, in Jefferson County, the most important issue is public education. And the voters down there understand that if you cut taxes too low, you won't be able to pay your teachers and you won't have good schools.
Can you cut taxes too much and face a reverb in a red state like Missouri?
Yeah, of course. I mean, no one wants to, cut taxes to the lowest possible rate and get rid of all these essential services, and no one really, even on the Republican or the conservative side, is saying that we necessarily need to do that. There are certain responsibilities of government that the government needs to live up to. At the same time, revenue is going to go one of two places. It's going to go into the economy and the market, or it's going to go into government. And the extent to which you're putting money into government, that means you are not putting it into businesses. That means you're not putting it into the economy. That means you're not putting it in the wallets of families who are struggling to get by these days. And that's a fundamental difference between the Democrat and the Republican parties, is that the Republican Party wants to leave more money in the pockets of Missouri taxpayers. The Democrat Party, they're very clear about it. They want more money going to government. I thought it was a fairly, all due respect to the representative, I know that he was pushing for a bigger tax cut. I thought the tax cut was pretty weak tea. You look at the states that are thriving in America today, Tennessee, Florida, Texas. These are low tax states. These are low income tax states. Now they make up for it in other ways. They make up for it, for instance, in sales taxes. You look at the state of Texas, they have a fairly high sales tax, but they have no income tax.
The average family pays more in taxes.
The idea being, however, that you push it down, you broaden the base. So in fact, you want more taxpayers. There are a lot of people in the state who aren't paying taxes who probably should be. You need a wide base of taxes, not based on income, based more at sales taxes, and those kind of, based more on what people consume than just the fact that they happen to be alive.
Representative Hicks, would the state of Missouri trade the growth rate of Texas for their own right now?
I would say probably. I mean, look at Texas. They're flocking to Texas. Governor Perry said it best when he was here. I mean, he came here advocating for people to move from Missouri to Texas. You've seen the commercials. I don't have to toot that whistle. You've seen it. And I think Missouri needs to step up. I think maybe we should be deflecting some of that and telling people, no, let's stay here and bring our own jobs. Let's bring our own companies and keep and retain the ones we have. And I think some tax cuts, and I'm going to agree with everybody. I do believe we can cut it too low. But you made a great point here, too, is, the more money that we have in our pockets as individuals, the more we will spend out in our economy. The
problem is if we have an economy based on sales taxes, you really are preventing the lower income people from getting ahead at all. I mean, Missouri has done a very good job in having a good tax mix. We have some sales, we have some income, we have some business. And that mix was pretty stable and has been pretty stable over decades. And I'm not talking about the amount. I mean, that's a different discussion, but the mix of taxes. Now, if Prop 7 goes through, you're going to see a and the tax cut is actually triggered, which I know it needs to be triggered, but if those are triggered, you're going to see an incredible difference in the tax mix, which is really going to hurt the lower income people, and it's going to fall, and we're going to separate further into higher income, lower, and we're going to become more and more two class. That does not bring everybody up.
But Jane Dueker, haven't the people of Missouri spoke? I mean, they really elected Governor Nixon.
Right.
They elected a super majority of Republicans.
Yep.
Governor Nixon said, I want the tax rate to stay the same. The Republican Party says we want to lower it. If their Republicans add to their supermajorities in November, will that not be the people of Missouri speaking and say we want lower taxes?
I understand, but just because people say they want lower taxes does not say what kind of taxes they want lower on. I think when people realize what sales tax do to them every day, then I think you'll have a different message. So while people, everybody would love to cut taxes. I mean, that's easy. Cut taxes, but you get all the services.
The bully pulpit. Yeah. The governor had the bully pulpit to put his message out.
I agree that the message of that needs to be clearer. And I think, and the pendulum always swings. I mean, we're going to see this pendulum go back, and it always does in Missouri. I mean, Democrats were in charge for 50 years, and, we overplay our hands, we start eating our own, then the pendulum swings back. I mean, this isn't new behavior. I mean,
I will say this, though, Jane. I do think that some of that is going to be that pendulum swinging back, and I totally agree with you. That is a fundamental rule of politics. Right, totally agree. Right. But I think that there are certain structural changes that have been made in Missouri politics in recent years that is going to make it much more difficult for the pendulum to swing back the other way.
We need full reform.
Well, here's an example. When you have state rep candidates, and I'm not knocking this, but they can get checks $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 at a time, it makes that pendulum a lot harder to swing back when...
Which is a crime. I mean, the fact that we don't have campaign
be that
finance
as it may,
is a
I would
crime.
just... I
mean,
think these Republican majorities
break.
are here for a generation.
Well, maybe, but I also think that instead of having, and I understand that the political reality and, you know, the tax cut had to get done, that was what they promised, and I get that. But when are we going to have a full discussion about the entire tax system? Why can't we take the entire, you know, and I think Nixon tried to make this point, which is, look, you can't touch one straw without touching all of them and make an effective, you know, as a CEO of a company,
and
you have to make an effective
we're going to have to take a break. We could go for a long time on tax policy. And we're going to take a quick break while we let Jane Dueker decide whether the candidate she supports for office will lead by example and start taking much smaller checks. But when we come back, we will discuss...
Which candidate?
When we come back, we're discussing an issue that I was very excited to talk about today. It was one of the first times in the actual political discussion, folks from St. Charles County have got to say how they feel about their role in the school transfer debate. And I thought that was a particularly interesting part of today, and we'll be right back. Thank you very much. And we're back. Thank you for sticking with us. We want to talk about, in our last segment, one of the most interesting parts of this debate. It was St. Charles County citizens running for office in St. Charles County discussing their end of the school transfer debate. RWBurke, you're very familiar with the legislative process. How did you think? Were you interested to hear what St. Charles County prospective elected officials felt like?
Absolutely. I'm from South County. I'm from Melville School District. I work for Vicki England, who voted for the school transfer bill. It's probably the most important issue to the people that I grew up with. And it was very interesting to see how it's impacted St. Charles County. And I think there's a similar dynamic there.
I think this issue is fascinating, and I think what it does too is it crosses party lines. This is not your strict Democrat-Republican issue, which I think it makes it extra fascinating. But the idea, I mean, I agreed with the veto of the bill. I don't believe transfers are a long-term solution. I think you got to educate kids near their homes, and they have to be the anchor of the community. And that makes sense not only in urban areas, but that makes sense in rural Missouri. You can't dismantle these communities, and it's never a good idea. You know, but this is the problem. And my biggest problem is with the state board. I mean, the legislation is one issue, but the state board's decision to declare Normandy unaccredited and send these kids off with their blessing to go transfer, then come back and say, never mind, just kidding.
Right.
Now, I agree that long-term, we have to rebuild these districts, and draining them of the resources is not a good idea. But the state board broke it when they moved these kids. They broke it, and they sent them away. So my belief has always been, you know what, these kids, they get grandfathered, they get to choose, they didn't do anything wrong. These kids, I'm talking about the short term, these kids, they get to go to their districts, and the state needs to foot the bill for that because DESE was the one that did this in the state board.
Representative Hicks, you're St. Charles County, and do you believe Francis Howell is mean, evil Scrooges for not wanting to subsidize St. Louis County residents' children's education?
Not at all. I think that they want the same for them as that their children have, and that the parents there are paying and doing and being involved in. It's a huge issue. I mean, that
should be.
That issue has, and you just said the word tricky. It's very tricky, and for all three of the candidates to have the question, I was very keyed in, wanting to hear what was said. They all three did very well with it too, because they have to live there as well. And I'm on education committees in the Capitol, so I hear a lot of these things. I mean, I only heard Common Core brought up the one time. Another issue on the other side, exactly. I mean, there's another one you can beat to death. But the transfer issue, it's not just at a state level here as far as in the Capitol building. It's hitting the local community. It's hitting the parents. And you mentioned the kids many times, which is, I think, the thing we need to, bottom line is, for all the candidates, that's where we need to start thinking. What message are we sending to them at the same time here? Like you said yourself, we're telling them it's okay, go here now, and now we're pulling them back.
The whipsaw is
children would just like an education. I'm sure some of them want to go. I'm sure some feel that, you know what, I wasn't that student. I wasn't the one that was so focused that I would tell myself, I want to go over here because I'll get a better education. Unfortunately, I was not that student, but I'm sure there are those students that are being held back that have a potential and would love to be able to transfer.
Gregg Keller, I'm sure you were that student. What did you think of the candidate changes?
Why are we laughing? Come on. Well, how can that be?
Well, you know, as a good Burkean conservative, I just believe that the answer is usually almost always at the local level. My kids go to school. I have 3 kids in the St. Louis Public School District now. And we were going to get a couple handfuls of kids from one of the city districts going into this last school year, and there are all kinds of gnashing of teeth and these horror stories about how terrible it was going to be, and we, you know, this is why we live here, because we want to have our kids near us, and now people are coming in who don't live here, and it's going to ruin the whole school district. And that absolutely turned out not to be the case. Right. And in our local community, we were able to say, you know what, it's a couple dozen kids across the school district, didn't have any adverse effect in our particular local community, and we as a community decided that we were going to continue to take those kids on into the next school year. So, you know, I like to hear talk about local control. I like people to make these decisions for themselves in the communities in which they live. To the extent that's possible, not all decisions can be made at the local level, but if that's a situation that we can have here, I think that would be the best possible outcome.
Jane Dueker, do you think the state should mandate that these suburban schools take students at less than the normal tuition?
Well, this is the problem that what I had with what the state board did. So now they're demonizing the suburbans and the receiving districts. Mm-hmm. Now, the state board has made very clear that they no longer believe in transfers because, you know, they've said that we're gonna, you know, that's what they did. That was the whole action was geared to get all these kids back in Normandy. And they were hoping for charity, which I find offensive to these poor children. They're supposed to beg for charity and hope that Ladue takes them back after they've been there for a year.
Which they did.
Which they did, but that's not the point. First of all, they were entitled to it under the law, and the law hasn't changed. So to say that, you know, that somehow they got to sit here all summer and wonder if somebody's going to give them charity and let them come back is completely offensive, and they don't deserve it. And so now you demonize the Suburbans when they know the state board is abandoning transfers. So they're supposed to buy into a transfer program for who knows how many years and how much money when they know the state board could and would pull out because it's not authorized by law, they could pull the rug out at any time, and then you demonize them for saying, oh, you should have just done it voluntarily.
So what's the answer?
So the answer is, well, we got to go back, and we got to go back to the legislature, and they have to double up and redecide is transfers the way we're going or not, and they have to make something, and you know, they're going to have to figure out a way to get a bill that doesn't get vetoed. But the kids that got whipsawed, they get to decide what happens to them after they were put into this system. And so I'm more focused on the short term, but there has to be legislation, and they can't make up the law at DESE.
So going back to the legislature, I heard from all three candidates tonight that they were not in favor of expanding Medicaid. I'll ask our legislative expert from the Democratic side, RWBurke, did you see any hope for Medicaid expansion from tonight's debate?
No, which is a shame because we're going to send our tax dollars to California, Massachusetts, and improve their healthcare system. I mean, it's an atrocity.
Representative Hicks, did you see any hope for Medicaid expansion? Do you see any hope for Medicaid expansion in the coming session?
No, I don't. I don't feel there should be. I think Dr. Onder and Chuck Gatschenberger actually said, you know, it's something that needs to be reformed. We're not going to just dump a bunch of money into something that we feel we're going to lose. You say we're losing money to other states. Whose fault is that, though? That's not our own. That's another section of the government, though, that's giving the money away that our taxpayers are putting in. Why can't we use that tax money for something else? Why does it have to be sent to another state? Irritating factor.
Do you believe if Republicans added their supermajorities, that's another statement by the people of Missouri saying we don't want to participate in Obamacare at any level?
I do. I think statewide you'll see that. I mean, it's been shown before. It was shown in the election that I was running myself. It was one of the largest issues. There were other issues I thought there were going to be. I thought there was going to be the right to work issues, or, you know, I'll be honest, the main two issues I had knocking doors then are the same still two issues that we're seeing right now, and that's the Second Amendment and how do we help each other with this Medicaid and things like that. I mean, we know there's people out there that need help. We also know that the system has people on it that don't.
Gregg Keller, would a Republican in Missouri pay a price for coming out for Medicaid expansion in a primary this year?
Oh, absolutely. You'd have to be well-nigh suicidal in order to come out in favor of that. I mean, it is tied to Obamacare. And I thought it was interesting tonight, too, that that's going to be the second word. If you vote for that, that's going to be the first word you're going to hear out of your opponent's mouth. Is this person voted to expand Obamacare? I'm not even certain it's true, but it's a killer attack. And I thought it was interesting. This is a state Senate campaign that you held here tonight. Every single one of those candidates mentioned Barack Obama. Most of them, multiple times. And again, you know, this is something that the representative and his colleagues are going to have to deal with again.
Right.
You want a primary as a Republican in this state? Vote for Medicaid and Obamacare expansion.
It's almost a
Jane Dueker, you're one of the top media personalities in St. Louis. Every time you go in the media, you recount the reasons why Missouri should expand Medicaid. However, the people of Missouri consistently say no. First at the polls in Prop C, now supermajorities of Republicans. If Missouri returns added supermajorities of Republicans to the legislature, all of whom, like today, said they would not expand Obamacare to Missouri, will you give up?
Well, I mean, the voters also overwhelmingly elected Jay Nixon, who ran on Medicaid expansion. So
I don't think that's actually true. I believe Jay Nixon didn't come to Obamacare
no, he
till 3
ran
weeks
on
after
it,
the
and
election.
in fact, we excoriate him for waiting for too long to get after it. So, yeah.
The voters actually reelected him before he changed. His road to Damascus was in late November, not early
he
November.
actually was for Medicaid expansion before his first term was up.
You saying he was before it before he was against it?
No, he's always been for it. He just was more
Easy,
vocal
Scott.
later
Come on,
in
friendly.
the. Yeah, I know. He doesn't have an opinion at all.
Right.
The moderator here
Yeah,
is
moderator
completely
Scott,
neutral.
yes.
Yeah. But, so, no, I
part's
mean,
over.
yeah, no, there's clearly some schizophrenia on behalf of voters. I mean, they clearly elect Democrats on a statewide basis, and then they have local Republicans, which in sort of the world is balance. I mean, they're you know, it's, so to say that voters overwhelmingly say no, there are a lot of polls out there that say people are in favor of Medicaid expansion is, you know, so.
When you speak about it in just those terms.
Exactly. When
I
you
mean,
talk, and you
you've
don't put
characterized it as
labels on it.
Obamacare, but
Right.
this is a state issue.
Let's
This isn't a
face it,
federal issue.
the hemp oil bill was Obamacare. They just named it differently. That was mandated, expanded health care. And it was overwhelmingly voted on by Democrats and Republicans. That was Obamacare. They just decided they didn't want to give a name to it. So, I mean, to say, so when you talk about it without the label, people say, well, of course there are times we have to expand health care for ailing children and other people. But that was expanded Medicaid. So the legislature that overwhelmingly hates Obamacare expanded Medicaid this year. Now, they didn't do it on a broad base, and that's something, you know, but I do think, and I agree with you, that reform needs to happen. I agree, there are things in Medicaid that, and I'm, you know, card-carrying Democrat, and I love my, you know, health care for kids, but there are things that can be reformed.
See, we can't agree on things
Yes,
too.
absolstart.
That's some of the issue
where
here.
we
Is
start.
reaching across the
and
aisle.
I think people would be more willing to talk about it, expansion, if they can look and decide what areas we can do better. And there are cost savings, and there are things that we can do. So I think if we could get off the labels, we might be able to get there.
You brought up an interesting topic, 2016. Representative Hicks, we have already Republican primaries and Republican statewides announcing. What do you see the gubernatorial election? Obviously, that'll play a big role in Medicaid and the direction it
That's
goes.
the role in Medicaid, I feel, right now.
How do you see the Republican bill shaping up in 2016 for governor?
Well, all I can say is our state needs it, for one. We need to start winning some of these statewide seats. That's the only way we're going to make some of the changes that we have and can do. We can only do so much in the House and in the Senate because of the message that comes out from some of the higher offices. They sometimes down some of the things that we're trying to do. I think if we can get a little more of the statewide candidates on our side of the aisle that are also willing to work on the other side of the aisle, I think we're going to see we had this conversation earlier. I think we're going to see a bigger, broader group of people coming together to work out issues as this one is right here. This is one of the touchiest issues there are between the two sides. Mm-hmm. But she just said it herself. I mean, there are areas where we can agree, because I know there's other people on that side of the aisle as well that feel that there is room for reform.
Is reform and expansion.
Absolutely.
That's the only path.
That's the only
Ryan
way to do
Burke,
it.
is there a Republican in this state that can beat Chris Koster?
No.
No.
Jane Dueker, can anyone beat Chris Koster?
Nope.
Is that the conventional wisdom?
I mean, unless something, you know, crazy happens, and, you know, I mean, you know, there's always game changers and legitimate rape. I mean, if there's some game changer, that's a whole different scenario. But barring right now, I do find, and I'm curious what you all think, because the primary between Catherine Hanaway and Auditor Schweik, I find extremely fascinating. And, you know, because I worked with Catherine when I was in the governor's office, and she was Speaker of the House, and you know, an incredible candidate in a lot of ways, and Auditor Schweik has done great about getting around the state and really getting out there in the auditor's race. And I'm just curious what Republicans are saying. You know, why hasn't that gone away? Is it going away? And, you know, and who's got the strength on that?
Maybe the person to ask is Gregg Keller, who we should note is affiliated with the Schweik campaign. How do you see 2016 going, and is there a Republican that can beat the Attorney General?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a dark red state, and Republicans have a chance anytime we put up a credible candidate. You know, like you said, I'm with Schweik. I think that both he and Hanaway are great people. I think they're great public servants. I'm with Schweik. I think the guy's a political juggernaut right now. He faces no opposition whatsoever in his race for auditor. No opposition in the Republican primary. The Democrats didn't even bother to put someone up against him. He's going to raise more money for the auditor's race than anyone has probably ever raised, with the possible exception of him. He's one of the greatest fundraisers that this Republican Party has ever seen before. He's going to win by a huge margin. Because he faces no opposition, you have to think he's going to carry a pretty substantial financial margin into a governor's race if he does decide to do that. And he's raising a ton of money. I mean, you look at the fundraising numbers from the most recent quarter. He raised three times what Catherine Hanaway raised. He has 3 times what her cash on hand is.
Speaking of Catherine Hanaway, I'll raise the Hanaway argument. Does she match up better against Chris Koster than Tom Schweik?
Obviously, I don't feel so because I'm working for Tom Schweik. I mean, I think Tom is a guy, he's been to 30 counties in like the last 2 or 3 months or something. He's going and he's doing auditing of virtually every county, every corner, every county courthouse in the entire state. I think he's going to have a tremendous brand. I think Catherine's fantastic too. I think we need to get away from having a Democrat governor in this state, though, and I think that both of them will give us an opportunity to do that.
That I totally agree with. I know it's going to be a hard one, though. Like I said, I know you're 100% that we have a chance at winning this, but I feel it's a hard race. I mean, it has been for years. Look at it. It's going to be a difficult race.
Representative, you mentioned Republicans taking statewide races more seriously. Do you think the announcement, like an Eric Schmidt, a proven vote winner, and the huge amount of fundraising that came after his announcement, is that a sign Republicans are being serious about statewide
Yes,
elections?
I just spoke with him, I believe it was yesterday or day before yesterday, too, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take candidates like himself.
Is that scary, Jane Dueker, for Democrats to see Republicans uniting behind a candidate like Schmidt?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, because we already are sort of united. We're not really stepping on each other's toes. We don't
But
have...
you've benefited from division in the Republican Party in the past.
Oh, absolutely, and I think Republicans have benefited, from division in the Democratic Party, and so yeah, I mean that's the way it works. But yeah, so no, I think it is very fascinating, and that's why I thought that the gubernatorial primary was so interesting, because everything else seems to sort of be falling into place, and that's sort of the one that hasn't yet, which I think is fascinating, and I'd be curious to to see why. But yeah, I think the supermajority in the legislature has had enormous trouble converting that to statewide success, and I'm not sure what is really going to change.
We're going to ask you the question in reverse: do the Democrats have somebody that can beat Schmidt?
Well, we have a whole cadre of great candidates. I mean, statewide, we have 4 of the 6 current statewide positions.
Right.
Deep red state, half of our Senate, and 4 of the 6 statewides are Democrats. So obviously, it's not a deep red state.
I want to thank everyone. Representative Ron Hicks, thank you for coming from St. Charles County. Jane Dueker, thank you so much for coming in. Ryan Burke with the RWBurke group, we appreciate your in. And obviously, Gregg Keller, thank you so much for coming. And thank all of you for watching the debate and this roundtable afterwards. Remember, the primary is August 5th, and that will decide the state senator. Thanks so much for joining us.